Hello, I'm Chris Stevens. I'm Director of the Holburne Museum in Bath, and welcome to our first virtual UpLate evening. The Holburne is a university museum, and we do many things with both the University of Bath and Bath Spa University. And one of the exciting developments of the last few years is that student groups have been delivering our monthly UpLate events, bringing together kind of a social opportunity and creative activities around the museum. It's one of the great disappointments of the pandemic is that we had to stop those events inevitably. So as we get ready to reopen, hopefully on the 17th of May, there's a lot of activity around me, people polishing floors and installing exhibitions. It's exciting to be launching this first virtual UpLate, but I hope there won't be too many of these before we can once again meet together physically in the museum and bring together groups of students and other young people for evenings of fun and creative entertainment. Enjoy the evening.
We're two textile design students studying at Bath Spa University. In November 2020, we came to the Holburne Museum to look for inspiration for our new project. We looked at all the collections and started sketching and designing.
Unfortunately, within a week of starting our new project, we went into lockdown, which meant we all had to revert back to working from home, which is unfortunate, but we all managed to make some wonderful items, and we're really excited to share them with you today.
So I visited the Holburne just before lockdown and just had like a wander around the ceramics, a lot of paintings, and I was personally drawn to more of the paintings and the draping of like fabrics that is depicted like in the paintings, and also looked on the online collections. I picked up a few shapes from the items on there, such as like a beaded basket. I then looked at fabrics I had in my own wardrobe that I could create those shapes with again, and then did some photography from that and tried to interpret it in fashion illustration. I'm very like make as I go and like design as I go and like make. I don't tend to do very well planning what I'm going to do exactly beforehand. It's usually a process of just have a little idea, then make something and think, oh, what can I do with this idea? And then, for example, my cardigan was just going to be quite plain and simple, and then I made it and then had different yarns, which wasn't the initial idea, but it just happened to be how it turned out. I made a cardigan with billowy sleeves, which is the main body of the collection. It also carries through the soft shapes from my online research and doodling. Plant pot, a couple of plant pots actually, a bag, an apron, then also just some like little pouches which I would maybe go on to sell as well.
I was inspired by the dresses on the paintings, so like the way the paintings were, like the movement in them and stuff, and then the details on the dresses as well. So I like doing really quick sketches, so I filled the whole sketchbook of quick sketches from the dresses. I usually just like take a small bit of the painting, like zoom in on it, and then take like really thick pens and just go crazy. I was also inspired by the pots in the museum. That's where like the main inspiration of my project came from, because I called it Potted. I do more sketches in my sketchbook with adding colour, because I just take black pens into the museum, so I add colour in my sketchbook, and then I go into the print room and screen print. I then had like, I think 6 main designs, and then it was lockdown, so I ended up doing all my work, like printing them digitally. So I transferred them onto my iPad and then got them printed onto different fabrics. My best one was probably onto leather, and then I made it into projects, and that one turned into a makeup bag, which is nice.
I went and did like a visit to the Holburne Museum, and
Within my visit, I was kind of really intrigued with the Rococo decorated furniture that was from the 18th century there, and especially the decoration around the keyholes on the furniture. And I was also interested in the Grayson Perry's exhibition. I was really interested in his funeral urns there, and that kind of then inspired me to look further into the Jasper ware pottery that the Holburne Museum had on display. So I kind of started it by just kind of doing loads of different line drawings of different things that I saw within the museum, and just taking little details that I found interesting. It just kind of came a bit fairly naturally, that I didn't really come with an idea of what I wanted to do. I just kind of saw some interesting bits, and then from my drawings I kind of did very vast of different elements. So some of them I also did do some drawings for some of the paintings and things, and then I kind of then later on decided which ones that I kind of felt really drawn to. Firstly, created some samples which were all kind of a combination of print and embroidery, and then also some hand stitching, and then I recreated them into 6 different products that included 2 cushions, an apron, 3 plant pot holders, and then as I said 2 cushions.
I went to the Holburne, and what immediately caught my eye was a Dutch funeral spoon, a highly decorative spoon engraved with the name of a child who had passed away, some skeletons on either side, bubbles rising up, basically just a really highly decorative, ornate piece of silverware. I was quite sort of intrigued really because of why this spoon was used to commemorate this death, where I would have thought a different sort of ornament or just plain engraving. But that led me on to researching more sort of funeral spoons in general, and then that led me through to researching Victorian mourning jewellery and their whole sort of ideation surrounding death. So it was sort of around every corner for them. It was a very big part of their life. So their whole life in a way was preparing themselves for death, and how they could sort of ease the passage across, especially for those who were left behind. So they had these sort of highly decorative, really personal pieces of mourning jewellery and ornaments and various things to sort of commemorate the fact that that person was no longer there, but they were still really, really remembered, still a real sort of focal point of family life. So I started sketching, painting quite expressively with acrylics and with dispersed dyes, just trying to create the mood, the shape, the form, the feeling basically. So I specialise in knit, so I sort of try to translate that across to knit through texture and shape and different things like that. I made a few samples, but most because of lockdown and everything, that sort of translated eventually into print because we didn't have access to the knitting machines or anything. So I took some knits and also some of my original paintings and digitally printed those onto fabric. And I also have a knitted cushion cover as well, but hand knitted.
I took inspiration from a couple of different objects, but one of the main one was a large oil painted from the Davidson Gallery, and I basically focused on the fruits within the imagery because I'm not particularly drawn to kind of old style stuff, but I felt that by picking up on the fruits, I could kind of give it a slightly more modern look, and I felt it was something that I could develop throughout my project, but I also took inspiration from a lot of the Oriental porcelain, as I do naturally get drawn to kind of like natural and nature and stuff like that, so all of the florals and stuff was something that I researched into, but I actually did further research into Oriental plants, which is where I found the ginkgo leaf, which was another main imagery piece within my project. And I also actually took inspiration from this little beaded basket where I focused on, it was just a tiny bit of the outside and it was just a kind of abstract curved shape, which I also developed. So they were kind of the three main imagery pieces that I took throughout the project as such. So once I'd kind of focused in on the pieces and done my initial drawings, I started to do my further research, whether that was the artist, particularly for the fruit, that really helped. And obviously the research into the further like Oriental plants. But then I started taking my own photographs of fruits and stuff because I wanted to not just use the fruits that were in the imagery, but just take colours and inspirations from them and kind of make it a bit wider. And I did feel like I did want it to be more modern, so there were certain ideas which I took from more modern artists as such. So I made 3 tote bags and then some cushion covers and an apron. And they were all based like on kind of plainer fabrics, but then they had the embroidery and the organzas on top. And they were all kind of based on the colour themes of the florals and the fruits from the original Holburne inspiration.
Hi, it's us again. Thank you for watching the first group of textile design students. We have so many more, so do stay tuned. I'm now going to hand over to Imi and Mari to show you how to screen print. This is one of the specialisms we have at Bath University, so I hope you enjoy.
Hiya, I'm Mari.
I'm Imi,
And we're second year print students.
and we're going to give you a tour of the print room and show you how to expose a screen.
Come on in. Okay, so when you first get into the print room, these are the dye baths, which we use to dye the fabric, to then screen print onto. And then if you follow me over here, we've got a range of all the dyes and to dye fabric, and then all the pigments to mix for screen printing, and then all the bases if you want to do anything different. And then if we come over this side, we've got the ironing station here, we've got the heat transfer machine here, and then over there will be the drying rack to dry fabric.
Right, so over here is where we print our fabrics. So we have 2 long printing tables that you can do like 3 metre repeats on, or just individual prints. There's loads of screens to use if you don't have your own, ranging from really large to just little A3 sizes. And now we'll show you how you expose a screen.
So this is where we put our emulsion on the screens. So we use this emulsion here, which is a nice turquoisey green colour, which we then put into the trough and then transfer onto the screen.
Okay, so this is the exposure unit, which we use to expose the screens. So what we do is put a piece of acetate or tracing paper with our design on in black onto the screen, and then the screen with the emulsion goes directly on top. We then close this and turn it on, and it creates a vacuum, and the light that turns on will expose the screen through the emulsion. And then we take it straight out when it's done after 2 minutes and wash it off in the wet room.
Then we put the screen straight into the drying rack, ready to be exposed. Okay, so now we have a fully exposed, taped up and washed screen ready to go in the drying rack in preparation for printing.
So I love taking inspiration from texture and colour. So going to the Holburne Museum, by looking at all the pottery and the paintings and the frames from everything, I took lots of inspiration and I did drawings, and then I translated that into patterns, and I just kind of wanted to put a modern twist on it because everything's quite like old. So I put a modern twist on it, and I really pushed myself with experimenting with scale. A lot of it was taking my drawings that I'd done from the Holburne and kind of taking them a step further, and sort of combining lots of different elements from the project and putting them together. And I loved all the figures that were in the paintings, so I kind of put my own style onto the paintings and sort of drew the women wearing their dresses and did all the mark making of the flowing of the movements of the dress and that kind of thing. Yeah. I knew that I wanted to do figures, but a lot of it was just experimenting, so I booked out loads of time in the print room and I was kind of trying to figure out what sort of style I was going for. And that's when I decided that my main final piece, I wanted it to be really large scale to kind of push myself because I hadn't done anything like that before. So that's when I made kind of a print almost like the size of me, and it was really fun. It was hard, but it was fun. It's taken from a painting in the Holburne, and the floral design on the painting is taken from the pottery, and I added an abstract twist onto that and then sort of stylised the face. And I also used some gold fabric and appliqued it on top, so then in certain lights it kind of has a little bit of a shimmer as well.
So we got set the Holburne brief, and then we got the option of going to the Holburne to do on-site drawings to inspire our project from the start. So I was inspired by the textures on the pots when I went round to the Holburne, and then that influenced my drawings in my sketchbook. And I like making very three-dimensional forms, so then that sort of led me to make the pots. And then I also related it back to my granddad's home, which was quite an old Victorian house, so the history of his house sort of informed with the Holburne and my drawings to make these pots. So I started planning out how I would make these pots, sort of the forms that I would use. And then I sort of got a colour palette together. It was sort of very different to the pots in the Holburne because they're very sort of more subtle colours, whereas I was wanting to go more vibrant colours. Yeah, I'm all about bright colours. And it's nice to see happy colours. And it makes the work look more, exciting. You make the pot, then you've got to fire it, then you get it back, and then you have to glaze it. So glazing the process, you don't know what the colours are going to turn out like. You sort of have an idea, but the colours are very different to when you glaze it to then when it's fired. I would say it looks like a collection that is very thoughtful in how I've approached everything, and it sort of all links together. So the cushion to then the cushion detail that looks like the detail on the pots. It all comes together, even though they're very different objects.
I was quite drawn to the women presented within the museum. So I was looking at kind of the context of the time period that it was set in. And it all seemed to be they were portrayed quite diminutive and subdued. So I kind of wanted to subvert that. So I took motifs and such from the museum, and I included that within my final collection. But it kind of took me on a journey more towards looking at ships' figureheads because they've got quite a powerful presence. So I was looking at influences from the cutty sark. First stage was taking sketches from the museum. I also took reference from the descriptions on the side of the paintings. So I kind of like abstracted the words from that so I could play around and do a bit of wordplay. So that's come into my final collection as well. Aside from doing A-level and kind of foundational art, I wasn't really drawn to drawing people, and I've done that within this collection, but they've been more like caricatures. They're kind of large-scale caricatures of ships' figureheads. Done some with writing, so that's been taking influence from old poems and kind of giving them a bit of more of a kind of cheeky modern twist to it.
So I visited the Holburne Museum and I really liked the big Dutch still life paintings there, and so did some sketches at the museum, and then went on to like food markets and like specifically fruit and veg drawings. I guess I really liked the all the different colours, because obviously the backgrounds are really dark in those paintings and the fruits are like quite glassy and shiny, and I had just random like shellfish in it as well, so it was kind of weird that the combination of things in it, so I quite liked that. I was like drawn to that because of it. Just more sketches and then translating that into prints using the workshop, study screen printing, and just kind of doing different layouts, and then some like stenciling I did in there with rainbow printing again, and yeah, and then obviously making them as well. We live on a hill in Bath, and I went to the shop to buy loads of fruit for this project, and so I got on my car and like piled it on my arms, and we live at the top of the hill, and I was like, my keys fell out my pocket, and then a couple of lemons fell out my hands and just started rolling all the way down the hill, and there was loads of builders watching me just chase after these lemons that were rolling down the hill, but I didn't get them. I'm pretty sure they've been run over, but... Well, I did that at home, and I kind of also changed my designs when I was at home because I hadn't finished all my prints, and so then I went on to do some lino printing at home, and then yeah, just like saw what prints I had and what like additional prints that I could make into something, and thought about what the kind of target market would be. So I thought fruit and like kids, and maybe like a country home kind of thing, and what kind of accessories they would have in that kind of house.
I went around, I did sketches. I mainly looked at Grayson Perry's ceramic plates with his fashion illustrations. So I've sketched from them, and then it kind of took a turn to focus on my younger sister Katie, which my project is called, and I took photos of her, then sketched from my sister Katie. Well, I liked the way that Grayson Perry had used like female models, or models identifying with being a female, and my sister's always been close to me, so I thought I wanted to capture the same movement Grayson Perry did in his ceramic plates, but into my own interpretation. I'm always drawn to like fashion illustrations, bright motifs, colours, which I really like in his work, and was shown around the Holburne as well. I did stick and ink drawings. I used the end of paintbrushes, some sticks I had to capture like the loose quality that Grayson Perry had done. I also moved on to a couple of collages, and from that I knew I wanted to use Designer Knit, which is like a digital knit program, to capture like the illustrative side like Grayson Perry. Yeah, I've made a couple of handbags, some with illustrative words. I've used like bright colours inspired by Grayson Perry, so I've got 2 handbags for sale.
So I started off looking from the website, as I didn't manage to get to the Holburne Museum, and the things that caught my eye were the silhouettes. So there was a silhouette of the Francis Holburne, which is one of the main guy, I guess. I just mainly focused on black silhouettes, profiles of my friends and family's heads and stuff. So yes, I did sketches from those silhouettes, and then so the geometric shapes that I got for the background, I was inspired by different other collections, and I like using colour and shapes and bold patterns in my work. So a couple of different works I saw just caught my eyes out. They were using really bold shapes in their work, and I was like, oh, if I layer those on to the silhouettes, it'll sort of bring the silhouettes forward and give more focus on the profiles and stuff. And then I moved forward to doing sketches from my family and friends. So I went back through all of my photos, trying to find good enough photos where they're just like side profiles, so I get enough definition of their heads and faces. So I focus on just the profiles as my main design, and for a couple of the ones I digitally made repeats of the silhouettes that I drew on Photoshop, which you can see here and this one up here. I made an apron, face masks, which I found was quite fitting to the times, 2 tote bags, a drawstring bag, and some pillows.
I went to the Holburne and did my initial sketches, looking at like shapes and motifs on objects that really inspired me. And I came across a cabinet that was like chinoiserie design, and I was really captivated by the motifs and like the shapes on that. So I began sketching the cabinet itself, and then I started kind of honing in on the details, drawing like the floral motifs, the birds, like the buildings that were on there. And then I kind of started adapting that into designs, like repeating patterns. And then, yeah, I made products from the designs that I'd printed and got printed digitally. In China, like, the cabinet's based on a chinoiserie, which is like an imitation of Chinese design. So my actual collection was called Imitation. I could see like a narrative within the motifs on the cabinet. There were like some people, some birds, and like floral patterns. Just really liked how it kind of was telling a story, and it was such a like unique item of furniture. It was handmade for like a specific person, so I just thought it was really like capturing. Lockdown was kind of like restricting how often I could go into the workshop, so I started kind of painting in my book and then scanning that in to Photoshop, and then yeah, kind of working from there. In my head I could kind of vision where the prints would go, like onto bags or cushions, but that kind of happened after I'd made my whole collection.
So my project was inspired by Grayson Perry's monster-like creatures that he featured on a lot of his ceramics. I wanted to translate this for kids wear and kids interiors. So I started off by sketching from his ceramics work, and then I took pictures of my housemates and I digitally manipulated them to look like monsters, which is quite funny, and I've like put their heads on like lamps and stuff to get some unique shapes for my monster characters. I then drew from these like digitally collaged images in my sketchbook, and I like created a personality for each monster to be like translated through their prints. So I have prints from all the monsters, and then I kind of looked at the monster's shape itself. So I've made like a cushion in the shape of one of the monsters with the ears hanging out and like the arms. And I made some little teddies like in the shape of the monsters. I like colours, it's quite colourful to do kids wear, and yeah, it's just fun. There's like a story within the prints, and there's like more to it than just like, as a child, if you look at the print, then you can make your own little story up of the monster.
I'd say the Grace and Perry vases the most. I just love like the engraving in them, the figures and the people that you could see, and then like the colors that he used. I thought it was really beautiful. I really tried to like capture that in my sketchbook when doing my drawings and designs. I wanted to include like all the details, so I used like a pen and then just tried to like draw everything I could see. And a lot of just like, I guess, shapes of vases. I look at different shapes, like bigger ones, smaller ones, different kinds, and then from that I kind of took inspiration and did some other objects like teapots and cups. And I didn't see this at the Holburne Museum, but I saw it online and people like took pictures from the Holburne Museum. I really tried to make it colorful because I found that that's what really inspires me the most. And just working with colors that are like really bright and vibrant, I just feel like I get more excited about the project. And yeah, I just thought the thinking behind it, I was kind of thinking about like the 50s style designs that you could see, where it was very like kitsch, and it had like I guess like teacups and things like that on like curtains and like tea towels. That was kind of my inspiration, but then obviously I modernized it a little bit so it doesn't look very old, I guess. And then for my products, I made an apron, I made a shirt, and I made I think like 3 or 4 bags. That was really fun for me to make.
So when I visited the Holburne Museum, I looked at the Georgian architecture, I looked at the interiors inside the museum as well as the collections. I think what sort of inspired me the most was the vase shapes that was on Grace and Perry's collection, as well as the frames that like held the paintings.
So when I looked more into like the frames, a lot of them were gilded, and that is something that dates back to like the Victorian era. So I had a lot of like inspiration from the Victorian era. I looked at like the furniture, and that's kind of what inspired me. I don't think a lot of people really tend to look at the frame, it's more of just what it's holding. But like I feel like the frames kind of have a sort of meaning and a story behind it with all like the intricate details. So I took on-site sketches, I then took that home with the photography I took there. I then was able to adapt that, like draw, repeat patterns, colour palettes, more sketches, and then I then took that into the print room where I explored a bit more of it. You draw your sort of design, you could do it on tracing paper or acetate, then you go and make your screen, and then you expose it on the screen, and then you print with the screen print. I had quite a big collection, there's different ones. I think sort of this is one of them, and I have like a few bits over there, but a lot of them are just very much focused on like boardings and just intricate patterns and stuff like that.
So I was mainly inspired by Grayson Perry during the museum. I liked a lot of his drawings of motorbikes he had on his pots, so I researched that further, and he's done a lot of designs and patterns on them, so I wanted to develop that into this project. From that I did my own photography of bikes in town, and then drew from those and created patterns based on that of my drawings. His use of colour and detail within his drawings, because I wanted to, because I draw quite similar to him, so I was quite inspired by how he does it as well. So from that I went on programs like Photoshop and stuff, where I brought my designs in and edited them digitally, and took parts away from each other, then merged them together to create different patterns and designs from that. The main direction for me was looking into mainly the bike wheels, so all the parts within that I took away and created repeat patterns for that, and that's how I created my main body of work.
Hello, I'm Yeating, and this is my work for the Holburne. So I was inspired by the peacocks at the Holburne, and I had this piece. It's a plique, and it's just a gorgeous screen print of a peacock with lots of applique. And I was also inspired by the birds on the pottery, which I embroidered. It kind of reminds me of Gucci and their work. I also did a large screen print of the angel that was on the clock. This is tie-dye piece with screen print. And last but not least, my favourite piece is this maze, which is a screen print with embroidery, if you look closely to it, the red and the flower. So this is my pieces for the Holburne. Thank you.
First of all, I really liked some of the pottery that Grayson Perry had done. So I was taking pictures of that mostly, because I think it's difficult as well when you're walking around a museum, you're what do you actually like? What could be your focus? Right at the end was a Roman emperor statue, which I thought could be interesting to draw. So in the end I took multiple images of it, so then I can have a look at different angles and play around with what I could do with like designing in the end. When I came to actually drawing some of my imagery, I had to go multiple times at each discipline, so then I could get a range of what I did actually like and what styles I could possibly use for developing my designs. I had part of like an Amari Japanese vase, and then I took a piece from another Amari pottery plate and I used that as a border. I made 2 cushions, one with Solis Minerva, which it was like a hybrid between like 2 Roman like emperors and Celtic like goddesses, and then I made a little Roman emperor little face cushion, and then I made 2 tea towels and 2 lampshades and an apron.
My project title was Tibach Tut, so that's a translation of small little cottage in the Welsh language, and I was inspired by Grayson Perry's collection of his pots and ceramics that I found in the Holburne Museum. I'm also really inspired by rural villages in my hometown, and I love cottages and small little homes from there. So in Grayson Perry's work I also found lots of motifs, lots of nice fine line drawings in his pots. So I thought I'd merge both interests and create a collection on little cottages. And then I went to draw all of these cottages, and as I do screen printing, I screen printed a load of cottages and different motifs from the cottages, so the windows and the doors, and made a few screen prints of them. So as I was making the prints, I didn't necessarily know what they were going to be, but I'm interested in interiors mostly, so I thought the house cottages would make really nice cushions, so I created some house cushions, and I made a lampshade out of a few prints, makeup bags and a few of them, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We hope you've enjoyed looking at the work that ourselves and our course mates have created.
The Holburne Museum will be open from the 17th of May, so come along for yourselves to look at the collections that inspired our work.
And we might see you there.